welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Framework Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Hopkins, and joined today with my co-host, Anna, and excited to have on the show today somebody who I would say that we can call a friend and a friend of the show here too, Kate Healy, who, you know, Kate, you're one of the people too this fall. I said I definitely saw more probably in the last 4 months than I did even the previous 2 years when we were back to traveling. I know you're in my paths have crossed a lot here the last couple of months. So excited to have you on the show here today with Anna and myself.
Well, thanks, Jamie and Anna. I'm so happy to be here. And you're right. It's been great to get back a little bit into traveling and see people. It was a long 2 years of no conferences and not getting feedback and things. So I think this is, I'm excited for the podcast.
Yeah, well, welcome. I know we actually had some, one of the questions we always ask people here is about food. So we'll get to that one here shortly. But I know we were in New York and, we had a lot of fried food in that like tent thing outside. And the whole tent smelled of fried food at the end of the night. It was kind of a funny experience. Just like, yeah, it really smells like fried food in here. I think we had a little bit of every type of possible fried food in there. There was wings and nachos and fish tacos and French fries, which I think was the whole journey, was to find French fries.
Right.
I think that was the only thing we were actually looking for. But so can you, I'll ask kind of two things here quickly. The first one is, can you just give people a little bit of a brief kind of who you are, what you do, and then I'd love to kind of hear about your favorite thing about food, whether that's favorite food item, favorite type of cuisine, and then we'll kind of round back into some other things, but that's probably a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. So appreciate you having me. So, I spent the last 13 years at TD Ameritrade, where I was responsible for marketing for the RAA channel. Had a fantastic time there and handled the link conferences, all of our marketing, acquisition marketing, brand, digital, everything that falls under the roof. We called me the little mini CMO of TD Ameritrade. And always on the side of my desk, since I got there, I actually spearheaded our women's initiative, anything we did around DE&I. We were the lead founding sponsor for the Center for Financial Planning, so I spent a ton of time with the CFP board and, worked with all the associations and really just tried to raise the awareness of what a great industry financial planning is. And I worked with a ton of colleges and universities to try to make people understand why more people should be in this, why we need more women, why we need more people of color, and just also raise awareness of the fact that financial planning is really good for everyone, not just the wealthy people. And I'd say my last 3 years there, we decided to move that kind of mission from the side of my desk to become my primary role. And so I headed up what we called Generation Next, because we really wanted advisors to understand how important we thought it was at TD Ameritrade that we were creating an executive position just to focus on this, so that advisors knew that they should not just pay lip service to paying attention to the changing demographics of the country and what their clients were going to look like, and quite frankly, what their associates were going to look like moving forward.
Awesome. Well, the second half of the question was the fun one, and I kind of tied them together for you. But food, tell us something about food from you.
Well, I would say the fried food was necessary for that evening, but it is not my favorite food. I would say, and we can argue whether or not you consider this a food, but chocolate is my favorite food. And I do consider it a food. One of my first jobs that actually had, taxes taken out of it was in a candy store. So I became expert on food, on candy and chocolate mostly, my time there between Belgian and Swiss and all the wonderful chocolate that we would get in there. I used to tell my mother, don't bother putting that Hershey's or Nestle in my Easter basket. I want the real stuff.
I want the good stuff.
Exactly.
I'm a chocolate connoisseur.
I know the difference.
So, Kate, another fun question I love to ask is, what was your first money memory?
Oh, gosh, Anna. So, I think I was about 5. Maybe I was about 7. But I remember being on the beach, Jersey Shore, with my father, and looking at these massive houses on the ocean. And I pointed to a house, and I said, Dad, would you buy me that house? And I promise that when I'm 18, I will pay you back. But I will pay you back more money than you lend me. because I kind of got the concept of the time value of money. I don't know how. I really don't. I mean, my father was an accountant, so maybe at some point we'd had some conversations. But I just remember sitting there, and I remember him saying, well, I actually can't afford to buy that house right now, so that's something we both have to wait on. But I looked at money as a tool to, it was great to have it, but it was really something that got you something else that you wanted. And so you had to learn how to use it to its best potential to get what you wanted.
And what shore did you guys vacation down to here?
Point Pleasant, actually. My grandmother lived in Point Pleasant, so we would go there quite frequently. We also went to Long Beach Island a couple of times, rented houses down there. But, I mean, any area of the shore, it's beautiful. And all have different personalities.
That's what I was going to say, though. Over in the New York, Jersey, Pennsylvania area, everybody kind of has their personality aspect, right? Where do you go? That's a very different thing for the people who go to Stone Harbor versus, different areas, Wildwood. And they're very close to each other, but still very different personalities.
No one understands that unless you're from here. There really are New Jersey's a small state, but we pack a lot into it.
Yeah. Well, do you have a favorite, since you brought up chocolate and now the Jersey Shore, on any of the Jersey Shore areas, do you have a favorite candy or chocolate store that you go to?
I don't think that any are around anymore. Some of them, there used to be some great stores in Asbury Park that made like it was Criterion Candy, and it made a lot of the candy that we actually sold at the store that I worked at, from saltwater taffy to chocolate and all of those things. I don't think it's around anymore. But all of it's good. I kid around that I'm a connoisseur, but if it's chocolate, it's good.
And so was that candy store your first job?
It was the first job that Uncle Sam knew about, I would say. Before that I had paper routes. I used to do my brother's paper routes for them when they were doing something else, and I would have to, deliver the papers every day. I had those penny saver routes where twice a week I was that annoying person that stuck the things on your mailbox in a little plastic bag that I don't know how my mother survived all of us. I think 3 of us had those routes, and we'd have those plastic papers, and those little circles would fall out all over the rug. Dog would try to eat them all. And I did babysitting before that. But when I was 14, I was in high school, and I was like facing a summer, and I was like, I am not just going to the pool every day this summer. That's way too boring. And everyone else in my family were lifeguards. And I was like, I can't sit there and just wait for something to happen. So I said to my mother, I want a job. And she said, you can have any job you want as long as you can get there yourself. So I found a job at the mall where I could ride my bike. And I was a little kiosk in the middle of the mall.
I love that. So you were making moves since back then, huh?
Exactly.
So speaking of that, what did you want to be when you were little growing up? And how did you tell us about your journey from those dreams to now and how you got here?
When I was very young, I actually wanted to be a nurse for a long time, probably till I was about 12. And then I thought, I learned about the hours, and I was like, wait, I would have to work Christmas Day and holidays and weekends. I don't know if this is really for me. And, as I mentioned, my dad was in finance, and I saw him going off every day, Monday to Friday. And I'm like, I like this business thing. I didn't really know exactly what, but I knew I liked business. I liked numbers. So I studied accounting and economics in high school. And then, went to college and was an econ and finance major with accounting on the side. So really just kind of knew that I wanted to do something in at that point in my life, I called it the business world, with money. Whether it was on Wall Street or not, I wasn't quite sure. It's hard to, if you're not exposed to it, you don't know it as much. And my dad worked for a manufacturing company, so it wasn't, or a pharmaceutical company. It wasn't like he was on Wall Street. I didn't really know many people who were, so that wasn't as open to me, or my eyes weren't as open until I got to college and really started to. And a lot of that, the tracks pointed towards more of the CPA route, which I didn't really want to do. So I, concentrated more on the econ and finance piece of it. Just loved the, how looking and analyzing numbers. I'm very analytical, and just figuring out like what's going to make something grow. Where do you pull away? What do you do more of? What do you do less of? And things like that.
And so where did you get exposed then to financial planning first, right? It's obviously, the econ finance majors and having some public accounting experience. They're still very separate from the planning world.
Yes.
So where did that start to come into play?
Yeah, so my first role, I was actually a mutual fund accountant at an insurance company. And I was in that role, then moved on to financial analyst and did a lot of the sales reporting for the insurance agents. And one day that role got moved into communications and marketing. No one knows why. They said, well, you communicate the numbers, you sit in communication. It didn't make any sense, but we did it anyway. But it got me, from a marketing perspective, exposed much more to some of the broader offering that the insurance company had, and it was financial planning. Now, it wasn't full-on holistic financial planning that we all think of in many of the roles today, but I knew enough to know that at the time it was a great way to introduce people to thinking about how they could think about their future. Obviously, much of the planning there was life insurance based, but I liked it enough that when the company I worked for actually merged and we all lost our jobs, I think I was 28. I took my what I thought was a very hefty severance package at the time, and I actually trained and licensed to become a financial advisor. So I knew enough that I thought it was a phenomenal career. Got there, loved the training, loved all of that, hated the selling part. I tell everyone I'm a failed financial advisor because I couldn't get over that hump of, this is back in the days when we were dialing for dollars, going through the phone book. I tell the story that I remember this woman who was probably in her 60s or 70s agreeing to meet with me, and in the back of my head I wanted to scream, why? You don't know me. I literally pulled your name out of a phone book and you're agreeing to meet with me. And I just thought, okay, maybe sales isn't for me. At that point I was like, if I could just sit in an office and clients would walk in, I'd be fine. I could do financial planning all day long, just don't make me go get the clients. And that's when that kind of shifted the focus of my career from that kind of finance, economics, behind the scenes piece, and really wanted to support financial planning. I realized, okay, I won't be the financial planner, but I still think it's such an important path for people to have access to, that I will do what I can to support that. And so, I didn't talk about, but a slew of jobs I worked at after that were in, whether it was marketing for helping in the advanced markets or the financial planning department of larger firms, some insurance companies, broker dealers, and things like that, to help just, again, raise that awareness of financial planning, help the advisors market to clients to get more clients access to financial planning.
When you look at where the profession has moved a little bit today, do you think you would have taken a slightly different career had you been exposed to kind of it today, right? I mean, because what you brought up was, most of the industry at that point, unless, right, you were an advanced solutions team for a BD or wirehouse or insurance company, which was, we didn't really have planners that just did planning, right? I mean, most people came in and you had to sell something, go get the clients. And it shifted a little bit now where there are true planner jobs, right? Where you still have the advisor that goes out, brings in clients, and then planners plan. Do you think that would have appealed to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think if I'd known more about it, I think, it was not just the selling part, but it was the commission based part, right? Again, I just bought my first house when all of this happened, and I needed to pay my mortgage. I think if I had the exposure to some of the different business models today, I think I would still be in it. And I kid around that, maybe I go back someday. But yeah, I think that it's not a one size fits all. And I think that the more optionality we have within it, for not just people working in financial planning, but for clients too. I mean, there are many clients, I speak of this, I know many people who, they have really solid 401k plans, and that's the bulk of their assets. But they do need financial checkups. Maybe the money is managed at a large firm, and there might be some tweaks that you're going to want to make, but there are people that need to just really look at, kids at different times of life. How much life insurance do you need at a certain point? How much retirement planning should you do? And, especially in two-income couples, you watch, and I've seen this with many of my friends and family where, they dedicate, maybe 3 to 5 years to someone's career, right? Someone's going back to school to get their PhD or do something else, and someone else takes on the bulk of the work, and then they want to flip that. And that's got a lot of different implications for childcare, for insurance, for retirement savings, all of those things. I think there's a lot of check-ins that have to happen every 2 to 3 years without necessarily always focusing on the investment mix. There's going to be, some focus on that, but the overarching issues many times are really about how are we going to live? Are we going to stay in this house? Are we going to spend the money or take the time for you to go back and get an advanced degree? What's that going to buy us later on? Do we wait 3 more years until the youngest is out of high school or college or whatever that is? There's a lot of family dynamics involved in all the decision making.
So, Kate, one of the cool things, I followed your career since I've been in the profession and been very impressed and very respectful of the work you've done in the DEIB world. And you've been talking about this stuff for over a decade, right? And so now you see the profession trying to kind of catching up to where you've been for a long time. So one of the things I'm interested in is, you touched on people might not know about the profession and back when there were different business models that might not be appealing to the younger generations today. In terms of what you see in the profession, do you think we're trending in the right direction? And are there critical areas that we kind of need to address more as a profession when it comes to the DEIB work?
I think we're trending in the right direction. It's been a long, slow slog, I will say that. But there has been, the past couple of years have obviously raised so much social awareness around this that I think that there's no going back, right? You cannot be a professional in the business world and not pay attention to this. And if you expect your company to grow, if you expect to retain clients and employees. So I think that it will continue. Now, will everyone, really do the right thing all the time? I don't know. And again, it's been a journey, right? It's something I say, like, one of the reasons I love this career is because there's lifelong learning. And in the DE&I space, it's magnified, right? Because we just don't know what we don't know yet. As you peel back this onion, every time I go somewhere, I'm just learning more things that I didn't know. And I always, say to folks, like, I'm going to try to explain things the best I know how, but please give me the grace to correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm saying something wrong or, God forbid, I'm offending people. I don't know everything yet. I grew up in one way, in one area. I get exposed to things. This career has been phenomenal to allow me to branch out and see and meet and know different people. I grew up in a very diverse town, which was helpful, but just it's still not enough, right? There's still so many things that we've got to look at. And, one of the things that, I talk about, I started this career. I was a mutual fund accountant. I went to work in New York City, and I'd say it was 50-50 male and female. It wasn't until I was in my career about 7 or 8 years when I turned around and I said, where all the women go? Right? They started out with me. Now they're not here anymore. What's happening? Why are we making it so hard for women to either stay or come back after they have children? Never mind the fact that there was not a lot of diversity from a race perspective in most of the roles that I was in. And it was funny because my high school was probably, 20 to 30% diverse. And then I came into the business world and like, where'd everyone go? So I think that, I think folks are getting the message. Demographics are certainly shifting much quicker than people realized. We've talked about it for a long time. I lived on the East Coast. The coasts obviously usually get there faster just because everyone lands on the coast before they start to move inward. And I think firms are starting to get it. I know I have talked about this for a long time, and I've finally had some advisors come back to me and say, I kind of wish I'd listened to you 5 years ago because now I'm 5 years behind, but now I'm starting. I'm like, that's okay. As long as you're starting, that's somewhere in 5 years, what do they say, right? The best time to plant a tree was yesterday. As long as you're starting now, you're going to see progress. And that's what's important, is being intentional and starting that progress. And yeah, we all have a lot to grow into. And hopefully we're going to get there. And we're going to keep the focus on creating a more diverse, sustainable, equitable industry.
I like a lot of what you brought up about I usually use a version of this, but about everything, not just in the DE&I space. Just I reserve the right to get smarter over time, right? It's what I'm wrong about lots of things all the time, and I want to get smarter about things. And I think one thing I've learned about a lot of these conversations are, a lot of it is not static and it's evolving constantly. Even when we think about terminology that's used, what's appropriate in the workplace, what's not appropriate in the workplace, what terms and, phraseology do people feel comfortable with isn't necessarily the same things that people were comfortable with a decade ago. Right. And I think that's a very interesting thing, right? That you have to be willing to, take some risk here and be wrong sometimes, but be given that grace to learn, right? That you're trying and that you're evolving, because the whole kind of industry and space and conversation continues to evolve. And you go back even kind of pre the events of summer 2020, and a lot of the conversations were actually different in 2018 than they were summer of 2020. And I that was kind of what showed me that a lot of these conversations are not as static as we might have thought before, that there was a lot of, this is exactly how you need to address things. And then all of a sudden it was different. And I hear different perspectives from people that I didn't hear 4 or 5 years ago. And I think that's been one of the positives, that this is much more okay to discuss now. As you said, like advisors didn't love having these conversations 5 years ago. It felt very forced upon them. And then now a lot of advisors are at least willing to broach the topic, have conversations, and reflect on it, whether or not it's all driving to change or meaningful action yet. But I think it's that perception aspect of it, to me, has evolved a lot. When you were at TD, you also you told me this story before, which I hope is fine. Which, if not, then we edit out, right? That's the great part about editing. But you talked about it, right? You talked about metrics. So this isn't a bad one. I think that you've talked about this and other things before too, right? Publicly. But you approach this whole area, right, of kind of next gen and diversity and changing the profession. And you had a very clear stance on how metrics should be about this, right? Can you tell that story a little bit?
I will, and then I'll tell you I've also been evolving on that. But yeah, when I first took on this role, a couple things. Even before I took on the role, I remember one day saying, I just want to know how many women advisors we have. And I was told, well, we don't have a gender field in Salesforce. And I was like, what? This wasn't that long ago that, and we didn't. So we put one in, but, that's just where a lot of us are starting from. And that's where I think you have to also realize, we didn't ask these questions 10 years ago. And so there is a lot of catch-up work. And so when I took on this role of Gen Next, one of the things I said is, I'm not going to be responsible for the number of women in a year, because this is such a marathon. This is a long-term journey. I will probably be, retired and living, gosh knows where, when we get to where we want to be. So we have to start to measure things. And because it's such a long-term journey, that some of the things that we measure in the beginning are just going to be activity, right? Like you think about, when you start from baseball or any of those kinds of things, right? You start measuring activity. That's your short-term measurements, right? How are you getting the awareness out there? Whether it's social media, events, all of those kinds of things, getting the awareness out there. Then midterm, you want to start to see how are you shifting the dial with how people think about you, right? And so I would start to say, okay, let's measure brand consideration. Who would consider the brand because of the work that we're doing? And specifically, let's look at the female gender. We didn't have a lot of racial demographic information. And then also we would look at the under 45 advisor, right? Because we were also looking at next gen, so that the younger, also second career, but easier to measure from a younger perspective. So measuring those, you want to see the dial on that move upward, that more people are considering you because of the work that you're doing. And then finally, down the road, that longer term measurement will be, what is the increase in women who are owning their own firms, right? Those are the kinds of metrics that you want to see. What is the increase in people of color owning their own firms, or having more of them in the industry as well? Again, we had only just started to count, racial and ethnicity from a diversity perspective. Probably in 2018, I think, was one of the first times we asked the question in the FA Insight survey. The CFP board had started to ask it a few years prior, but so there was a lot of catching up to do there. But it's looking at it from a longer term. And then the more that I've been getting into this since then, I was just attending the CFP Board's Diversity Summit, the fourth annual summit. I think it was 2 weeks ago, virtually. And there was a great session on metrics, right? And it was really starting to measure those things we talked about, but really getting smarter at, when you're starting out, those are the measurements, right? Taking a look at a picture in time. But as you're moving along, how do you start to look at what the leading indicators are, right? To make sure that you're getting more diverse people, whether it's hiring your firm or bringing them into the advisor world. And so you're looking at different things. You're not counting, you're looking at whether it's where you're posting, job openings or recruiting, and the types of organizations that you're working with, because you've got to change what you're doing to make the change here. So it can't always be going to LinkedIn, to people's networks that have a lot of people that they know that are just like themselves, but it's reaching out to, whether it's HBCUs or different kinds of organizations that are more geared towards more diverse audiences. Starting to measure that, and then getting to the point where you're also measuring the activities of, really the people within your firm, right? You think about, it's not just HR's role, so how are you operationalizing all of these pieces within larger parts of your organization? So HR has one role, but the hiring managers have a role, the hiring teams have a role. How do you operationalize it within your firm, whether it's, mentoring of underrepresented folks, giving them, what are the kinds of measurements where if you have them job share or get them job shadowed or have them mentored or sponsored by someone, are you starting to see an uptick in those numbers? And then you also have to look at your own firm, because bringing them on is just one thing. How are you making them feel included? And that's where we're really getting the value, right? Diversity only works if we're actually listening to the diverse people that we brought into our organizations, because the whole reasoning behind it is for all of us to get better and smarter. And the research has shown that the more diverse all of our teams are, the better we get. And so how are we making sure that those people have a seat at the table, that they're being included and their voices heard?
So Kate, you brought up recruiting in that, and I always loved your perspective on recruiting. Like at an FPA event, I think it was in 2019 in Minneapolis, you talked about how we're kind of competing for the same talent right now and kind of poaching stuff from each other. And even though that was 3 years ago, it's still kind of true today. So you talk about, looking to different pools to recruit, including, military veterans who are diverse in nature, and just different places. So can you tell our audience a little bit more about that and some recruiting tactics they could kind of engage in to attract that diverse talent?
Yeah, absolutely, Anna, right? Like we think of ourselves as just like, oh, well, we're financial advisors. Like we have to look for more people like us. Well, guess what? 17% of financial advisors have a communications degree. That's the same number that have a finance degree. So are we saying one is better than the other? No. Anyone can learn this profession. It's not a secret. Most of it isn't. But so it's important for us to look out. So what we need to do, so the challenge, you're right, is people are starting to poach from each other. And you're just rearranging, deck chairs on the Titanic when we do that. We do have a recruiting challenge. And so advisors have to really get more involved, whether it's creating a pipeline at your local school by creating internships, or reaching out in your community and looking for military who are returning to work, people who stopped working to take time with their family who are returning to work. Usually it's mostly women, but it can be anyone, right? How are we creating a pathway for them to come into this business? And how are we tweaking our training programs and thinking about compensation? Because someone who's been working for 10 years doesn't want to come in and start at a starting salary of a 22-year-old. We have to remember that just because you left the workforce doesn't mean your brain went away. It's still there, and there's a ton of experience that people can bring to the table. So whether it's creating what we call a re-internship, where someone's re-entering the workforce, and I always say, like, if you haven't been in the workforce for 5 or 10 years, the big thing you need to learn, get up to speed on, are technology and working with 3 to 4 to 5 different generations in the workplace. Right? Those are the kinds of things you can pick up on, what changes have happened in, whether it's tax laws, financial planning, behavioral finance, those kinds of things. You can learn that. But how do we make sure that people feel that they're in an environment? Quite frankly, I think all of us need to. I used to kid around. I'm like, our firm element training should have technology updates every year, because we all don't use our technology to the extent that we could. So it's really about reaching out to different audiences, right? If you want to hire women, there are a ton of women MBAs who maybe took time off to help a family, or maybe they were a military spouse and had to keep moving and it was hard to keep a job. How do we look to create more flexibility to keep them in? There are places like the Forte Foundation, which is a group of MBA women to go and recruit from. There are so many ways that we can expand the audience of what we have. Also look at career changers who are going to, whether it's Boston University or any of their certificate programs to get their CFP, right? We generally go to the schools that have a bachelor's degree, but there's also a huge pool of talent that is coming out with certificates because they already have their degree. So we need to expand where we're looking from, and also remember that we've got to develop folks. I think everyone wants them to come in the door and start to work right away, and none of us ever did that. So let's remember that we've got to be able to create that development path, and there are tons of tools and resources and consultants out there that can help advisors do that. Their broker-dealer, custodian, or someone that they work with already has this packaged out. I promise you they've got a learning path, in their learning development systems that you can work with. The FPA, NAPFA, IWI, all the associations have it. Your partners, any partner you work with, like Carson Coaching or anything like that, they're going to have all of this information for you. So you don't have to, I think everyone feels daunting, like, I don't have an HR department. But these resources are out there for everyone.
Yeah, the one thing, Kate, that I've learned on that side, having trying to recruit now for a while, which was also that building the pipeline back to the schools and, military, both of those, they do take work though. And I think for a lot of smaller shop advisors, they don't necessarily want to put in the work. Right? They say they want people, then you go, hey, you have to go do these things. And it's also a time thing. I mean, I get there's a lot of pulling pieces there, but for a lot of people, they say they want to grow, but I don't necessarily see the work that they want to put in. And then you've got to find people to partner with that can help you build those relationships and pipelines too, because it's not necessarily easy. The easy button is, as you said, throwing a resume up or a job posting up on LinkedIn and then hoping somebody applies, and then you don't get the applicants you want, and then you say, where's the person with 3 to 5 years of experience plus a book of business, which everybody wants. But you really do have to take time and energy to develop those individuals, and I think that's a big probably a mindset shift that the industry isn't fully prepared for, as we have a declining number of people entering the profession and declining number of advisors. I think that's today front and center, and what do they call this? The Great Resignation period right now, I think, is the new term that's been out there, and it's hitting advisors, it's hitting CPAs, and it's going to be, to me, I think that it probably fast forwarded a challenge that was probably more 5 years down the road, almost till this year and next year, because of COVID in 2020, then into 2021, and it really did accelerate an issue that was probably sitting just under the surface, I think, for this profession. If you were advising somebody today who's running, the 5-person traditional RIA shop, right? The advisor, maybe 2 support people and another planner advisor, kind of what would you recommend for them to prepare for, having the right talent, both retention and recruiting today?
Yeah, and that's really where so many advisors are, right? And so step one is just thinking about it, right? This is work, and no one wants to do it, but it's paramount. You've got to do it in order to build your firm, because you're never going to be able to have a succession plan, number one, if you just don't have a successor, or if you think you're going to sell your firm and you don't have that kind of built-in growth there. But what I also tell advisors too is sometimes it's just turn around and look within your own firm. There are a ton of people that are working in your firm that you could develop into roles. So, I talk about when I got into financial planning and I hated the sales part. Well, when I think about it, I could have changed my career path and maybe gone into an operational or client service role, gotten more confidence, gotten to know the business, and then if someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, I think, you'd be a great advisor, I would have said, you know what, yeah, I could do this now. I've got a lot more experience. I get how it works. It's not just, there is selling, but it's not just I'm sitting there dialing for dollars. I'm having relationships with people, and that appeals to me. And so creating that career path within your own firm, even if you only have 5 people, there is no reason that your ops person, those folks can't start to develop, start to train for the CFP, and start to meet with clients and take on more of those responsibilities. And then you backfill their role with really good client service where you can get anywhere. You see that every day in your day-to-day world. You go to Starbucks, you go to a restaurant, you go to a company where you see someone who's really hustling and has that client service mindset. That's the people you want to bring in your firm. And so you create that pipeline that way. I still wouldn't, the other piece is to talk to your clients. You know, they get what you do for them. They know it. They're going to have that network of people maybe returning to work. You know, maybe that did that great resignation. And we've seen some of that starting to bounce back. A lot of people resigned, retired early, and then realized that they don't really want to be retired. And there is a plethora of talent that can come in and help out your firm. So talk to your clients. Let them know that you're looking to grow because they get what you're looking for. They get the value that you bring. And in this really hard recruiting world, they can help sell your firm to a prospective client. And then don't forget building out the pipelines at the schools. Again, it takes some time, but if you put in the time, that's creating the flywheel. Because if you get 1 or 2 interns that have a good experience at your firm is going to come to the top when the program directors, when other students are talking about it. And make no mistake, they talk about the firms that they work for and what their experience was like. And it's going to create that. Network everywhere, at the associations, at dinner parties, all of that stuff. And, you may have to then look at talking and partnering with another firm if you really are having a challenge with creating that talent, because talent is, right, like that is what you're selling. For many advisors, it's the team of people that you work with. I used to say all the time when I worked for TD Ameritrade, a lot of what I was selling was our service organization. Right? That's the thing that brings people. It's the talent. And so it is so important that you cannot put this to the side and think, well, it will just fix itself. It won't. And if you're not intentional about it, and also developing the people on your team. And so showing them that there's a path for them, for the path that they want, right? Now, everyone wants to be the owner of the firm. Not everyone wants to be a client-facing advisor. But financial planning firms have grown have grown to the point where they need professional management in a lot of different areas. Maybe they need a marketing person. Maybe that frees up someone else. I think it's one of the disservices that I think that we do in this industry is that when we count gender, we only count advisors. So we talk often about the fact that there are 23% women CFPs or only 15% overall women financial advisors, according to Cerulli. But 46% of the industry is women. They're in non-advisory roles. So this is an industry for women. You don't have to be an advisor if you don't want to be, and you can develop yourself to get there. But I think it's important for us to talk about all of the roles that are available within advisory firms, not just the advisor role, because that's what we've done in the past. And I think that's also what narrows the pool of talent that gets interested in us.
So Kate, you've talked before about like attracting diversity is one thing, but inclusion and belonging and keeping them and retention is quite another. And then you've also talked about how like flexibility and options to work remotely have kind of create environments where people are more included and feel more included. Do you think, one of the positives that maybe came out of the pandemic, do you think that this new environment where there are options for remote jobs, like both Jamie and I are not in Omaha right now, right? We're at Carson Group, but has it made it any better in that respect in terms of retaining that talent and being more inclusive environments?
It's made it easier, right? And I think it's proven. So I've been working from home going to the office or have the option to work from home for probably 15 years. As a matter of fact, when I got to TD, they were, my boss at the time was like, oh, I don't know. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think to ask you because I've been doing it. I just like to know I can work from home. I don't always like to be at home. I just want to know I can. So it has opened up the possibility, but what I will tell you is I was just at a conference a few months ago and I was speaking about this and someone said, well, my team, I said, what kind of challenges are you having with retaining next-gen employees? And they said, well, my talent, they want to work from home. And I said, well, aren't you letting them work from home? She said, well, their jobs can't be from home. They have to be in the office. And I said, well, I think that's something that you have to look at because this ship sailed, right? People know they can work from home. So they don't have to work from home 5 days a week, but they know that they can work from home. And so as employers, we need to make jobs allowed to work from home. Maybe it's 1 day a week, maybe it's 1 day a month, whatever that is. And if there are parts of your job that can't be done at home, and there are regulations around a lot of things, So I get that, but there are also ways to share jobs a little bit so that someone can have the flexibility to 1 day a week or 2 days a month to be able to work from home. As employers, we need to provide that to them, because there is no way that we can create this gap where some people can work from home and some people can't, because then no one's going to do a job that has to be done in an office, right? Why would you do that when you could have this flexibility to have that? And again, it's just the flexibility. I tell advisors all the time, sometimes it's about offering it. People don't always take you up on it. Like, I don't like to work from home. I'd rather be in an office, but I want to know that I can work from home. If it's snowing, I'm not going in. If I have a work person coming to the house, I want to know that I can stay at home for that. But I would much rather be in the office. So there are different there's different avenues, and that flexibility is really important. And maybe it's, there are just certain times of the year, or sometimes it's not even not going to the office. It's different hours. Maybe you have to drop your children off at school and you can't be in the office until 9:30, but then you'll work and then you'll leave maybe at 4 because you got to go pick the kids up. And I used to have a team where almost everyone was a working mom, and all of those folks got on. Like, I knew they were getting their job done. They're adults. We have to treat people as adults, and responsibility. It doesn't matter where you are or how much time you're spending, right? You have a job to do. And if they can get that job done, why should we care if it's not required by regulations where they are doing that job? As I always said, it's why God made laptops, to allow people that flexibility.
I like that. That's a funny quote there too. When I looked at the culture, I was like, when I look at the culture of TD, when you were there, I always looked at TD as, right, a very caring, a very forward-looking culture, right, and a very technology-driven culture. Where did that come from, and how I don't know if those were stated ones in the culture there, obviously, but all three of those, I would say, are things that people recognized about TD and the culture and how the, kind of people just behaved. Where did those come from, and what were kind of the guiding principles there as a firm that helped TD really achieve a lot of success, and I think also endear themselves to a lot of advisors, right? It was a very well-liked brand in the advisor community.
Yeah, and a well-liked brand from an employee perspective as well. And I think, a lot of it was we were built on Midwestern values, right? The Ameritrade part. And really what I think was unanimous around the firm was the client-first focus, which prevented or minimized any kind of some of the political things that you see in other firms. I've been in financial services for 35 years. I worked for a lot of large firms, and there were just certain things you had to do or games you had to play, and it felt like it wasn't always in the best interest of the client. And everyone at TD kind of, that's what we did, and we worked hard, and so some people self-selected themselves out because behaviors that might have advanced them somewhere else weren't going to fly, and they weren't going to advance them at TD. We did not allow for sharp elbows. If you were someone that came in and were going to treat someone bad to try to make yourself look better, you didn't get promoted. You were probably asked to leave. You figured it out yourself that it wasn't going to be the place to leave. So that client first focus, I think, was the biggest piece of it. Everyone was nice. I remember when I interviewed there, someone said to me, I worked at a wirehouse. I worked at another discount brokerage. The wirehouse was just crazy with regulations. The other place was a mess. This is a combo of both, but there's no a-holes here. And I said, all right. And I was there about 6 months, and I remember going up to my boss, or going up to Tom Nally and saying, like, you don't understand the culture you have here because you've only ever been here. Like, if you mess this up, I'm out of here in a second. Like, this is so special. And I think that we just listened to advisors. Like, we knew that they had a business and we were trying to help them run it. And so we really took the feedback they gave them. I remember, in marketing one time, we came up with this great idea that we were going to create a community for advisors. And it was going to be amazing. And we got our marketing team on it, our dev team on it, our agency teams on it, all of these teams to come up with this technology solution so that we could build a community for our advisors so that they could communicate with each other. And we presented it to that, I'll never forget this, an advisory panel meeting. And they looked at us and they said, have you guys never heard of LinkedIn? And we just said, well, yeah, but this will be. And they're like, you can just create a group on LinkedIn and we can do the same thing and save yourselves a lot of time. And we were like, you know what? You're absolutely right. Scratch that idea and go ahead and do that. And so I think it was just that really, really listening, not just listening to check the box, but listening to say, like, we are not the smartest people in the room all the time. And also, and that was a big piece of it, was very much that we listened to our teams, right? Like I would tell everyone, you know, if you send something to the senior leadership team, sit by your desk, because they're not going to call me to ask questions. They're going to call and ask you, because you know it much better than I do, because you're in it, you're doing it. And so people always felt that they had that ability to talk to anybody. Levels didn't really matter that much.
I want to say a funny thing about this. So I often stay, and there's a hotel, the Marriott, the Town Place Suites or whatever, that's like in the parking lot there out in Omaha. And that's typically where I stay when I'm out in Omaha. And I went for a run. It was like maybe like 3 weeks ago or so. And it was pretty late at night. And like the security guy came and he kicked me off. Like I was, you know, there's actually like a water trail there too along, I don't know, whatever. I don't know what you call that thing there. It's like a drainage / river ditch thing. But it was late, so I'm not running down there. So I was just like running through to go further down on the road. And the guy was like, hey, do you work here? And part of my thought was like, does anyone still work in here? Like, I was like, no, I don't. And he's just like, oh, it's private property. You can't run here. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. Like, it's the parking lot that I'm heading through. But, you know, to me, it was a sad thing. I was there the day that the news got announced. And I think I tweeted a photo. Then I wrote, like, Schwab Trade up on the sign there. And I know Mary Kate said that people did not find that amusing. So you don't need to reply to any of those things. So those are just my anecdotal stories here. But obviously we've had a very good relationship with TD and have a good relationship with Schwab too. So it's just different, you know. There's things that I'll miss. I think the conference was always great too. And one of the last big conferences we went to before everything shut down. Yeah, it was about it.
Before everything, it was February 2020. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah, I missed that. Definitely missed that. The conference was the highlight. I did 9 of those conferences. I remember my first one in 2009 in Vegas with maybe 800 people, and last one was the last one that I ran was 2017. It was over 3,000 people. So it was a really amazing growth to see that. And one of the things that I loved, and it kind of just speaks to the culture, was that it wasn't the marketing conference, which when I ran conferences at other firms, it was. This was a TD Ameritrade Institutional conference, and everyone got involved and had a say. And we had a cross-functional team that we had legal, we had compliance, we had technology, product, marketing, sales. Everyone was a part of that team, which was great.
Yeah. And what, Weezer? Was Weezer the closing act in
Weezer
2020?
was the last one, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So that's...
I don't miss that discussion. That was the hardest part, was the band.
The band.
You have no idea how many conversations would happen around that. Starting from the day after, like it would start like February 7th. Like, all right, who we get next year?
What band did you not get that was like
so
one that
bands.
somebody who... But was there ever one that everyone thought you were going to get and it fell through or anything? Was there ever one
I think that
just...
we tried to get trained and then they just weren't available the year that we wanted them. So we ended up getting them like 2 years later. And then there's, everyone wanted, but budget's just not there. There's so many people that, would come through and it's like, yeah, but we're not paying $1 million for, we're not getting, U2 or Journey or those folks back together or anything like that. The Rolling Stones, all of that kind of great stuff. But.
Well, Kate, when you get to missing awesome conferences, just come to Excel again. We got you.
And no, Excel was great this year. It was really good. And in prior,
the best I read.
I think this was the longest I ever stayed at Excel, so that was nice. I used to there's always something going on.
Yeah, you come in for a session and leave, and it's when you're kind of on the other side of things, right? Like I usually, and I didn't get to see a whole lot either still at this one, but I'm like, I can't remember the last time I've just attended a conference, and it is something I feel like I need to do again, to just be like, what is the experience of an attendee at a conference? Because I honestly haven't done that in, probably 6 years now, where I've just shown up and attended and not been speaking and not leaving halfway through or whatever it might be.
Yeah, it's fun. Try it.
So, Kate, you've done a lot of amazing things in your career and your life, but what is the legacy you hope to leave on the profession and in your life?
Now I feel really old. I think,
We
ask everybody this, though, so it's not an age
we
thing.
asked Nicole Casperson the other day. She's
yeah.
So my legacy for later on, much later on. Really,
much later on
is that, just really just trying to make this a better, more accessible profession for both people working here, but really for the public, because I just think financial planning is so important in helping people get to a better place for their family, that I want to make it more, raise awareness of it, not just as a great place to work, but as something that's available to many more people than ever think that they could get financial planning help.
Do you personally have an advisor or financial planner today, Kate?
I do not.
Sometimes
I do it myself.
Okay. Is there a reason that you've chosen to do it yourself? I don't ask everybody this question. I feel like I should. There have been different times where I ask advisors and then I get their answers, and it's very mixed. It's not a consistent yes or no, but it is probably one that I want to ask more people. But
it's a great question. It's something there is a colleague of mine who would be listening to this right now, laughing and saying, "See, I told you." Mm-hmm. Partly just because I can do it, and my situation is not terribly complicated. I do see as in the future, it will probably be something that I would look to get a little more help on. But again, it's less about the investments and it's more about the estate planning and all of that piece of it, and tying in the tax planning and those kinds of things. So, I'm sure there's a ton of people out there saying you could have gotten a better return, you could have done this better, and you're not wrong at all. I also like it. It's something, if I showed you the spreadsheet, remember, I'm accountant, finance, econ, like this is my, I took parts of the CFP and passed them, so this is my kind of my hobby in a way. So that is partly why I do it myself. I love keeping up on just, latest changes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a good conversation to have. I know one of the last people I had it with was Larry Sprung, and I know we talked to him about, kind of his same view on that, right? Like, where, do you have an advisor? And I kind of pushed him on, like, well, what is the best value of an advisor? And he brought back the behavioral. And then that's a tough one, right? If you truly believe that that's a big impact, you can't really mitigate that yourself, right? Which I think is an interesting aspect of the planner and advisor world. And then the other one I typically push on advisors on when I ask them this too is, like, I have an advisor, but it's less about me. It's more of the backup plan for the family, because my wife, on the other hand, is not interested in this, does not have the time for it, right? And it's not that she couldn't learn all of it, right? She's very smart. She's smarter than I am. She's an attorney. She went to Johns Hopkins. She's very, very bright. And but she just doesn't spend her time in this world, right? She spends her times with, like, corporate defense litigation, and it's very different. And to me, that's what we're delegating out, is that aspect of it, because tomorrow I might not be here, or I might not be capable of doing it tomorrow. And so that's kind of where I've taken the approach, but for everybody it is different. So it's just not that there's a right or wrong from my side, but I appreciate you answering the question too. It's good.
I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for that.
Yeah, well, that's okay. We can end on a more fun. I do have the Riskalyze glasses here too, so not that everyone can see them, but they ran a nice conference this year too, speaking of conferences. But thanks, Kate, for spending time with us. Thanks for being a friend of the firm, for having this huge impact on the profession, both at your time at TD, and I know we didn't talk about the Foundation for Financial Planning much, but probably at least worth mentioning them here at the end as a kind of closeout of a place to engage with and look at if you're a CFP professional, professional and you're looking to give back, maybe just do the 30 seconds on kind of what the foundation's focused on with CFPs right now.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. You know, the Foundation for Financial Planning, it's the way to give back and provide pro bono financial planning to people in need. Thank you so much to Carson for being an RIA Impact Partner. We've got 9 RIA firms who have pledged support, as well as our corporate impact partners, and then just individuals who support the foundation. But if you go to ffpprobono.org, you will see stories of people that have been helped by so many advisors in the industry who are giving back, and it's been phenomenal, helping people with families affected by cancer, survivors of domestic violence, people who are in the military. We work with AARP. So there's a ton of different people, and probonoplannermatch.org is a place that you can go and look for an opportunity for you to give back, whether it's a one-time virtual opportunity or once we all get back into the world, they can be. We have both virtual and in person, and you can pick a short-term opportunity or a longer-term opportunity to help someone. And if you don't have the time, we always accept donations that we help to work with the nonprofits to create these opportunities. So thanks for letting me give that plug. It's the giving season. Tomorrow, I think, is Giving Tuesday. So ffpprobono.org. Check out the Foundation for Financial Planning. It's been great. I spent a lot of time. I've been there for about 10 years. This year, I'm the chair of the board, so I've been diving in a little extra deep because I've got some extra time. I kid around with the CEO that I'm in his face all the time. But it's such a special organization that really gives back and allows all of us to give back in such a powerful way.
Wow. This was fantastic. Anna, Kate, thank you both for the amazing conversation today. And everybody else, thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Framework Podcast.